Well, everybody's favourite mass-murdering cuddly uncle is back for a brand new series of adventures on Big Finish. As in today's review, I am of course going to be taking a look at Volume 6 of The War Master, entitled Killing Time, starring Derek Jacobi. This release is available to order now on the Big Finish website. The physical box set is £24.99 and the download is £19.99. Now naturally, of course, I absolutely adore the War Master series. It is a series of adventures from Big Finish that I've adored since its very beginning with Only the Good many years ago. I've been following this series through with each and every volume. I've really loved what this series has contributed to this previously rather undiscovered variation of the Master, and to this point, to this day, I think that Derek Jacobi is now my personal favourite Master of all time, because Big Finish have managed to elevate his incarnation and create some absolutely incredible stories, and Killing Time is most certainly a continuation of that. You can listen to this release having not listened to any of the previous War Master series. Quite a lot of the box sets are indeed standalone. You can basically pick a box set which interests you the most. Killing Time opens with the sincerest form of flattery. Both episodes 1 and 4 act as bookends for this series, linking everything back together to the Stagnant protocol. Meanwhile, we have 2 episodes in the middle where the Master catches up with his past. A plague has hit the Stagnant protocol, an area of space deeply affected by a weapon used within the Time War. The people seek the truth, with some denying the existence of the plague and others questioning the lack of food and resources. As an opener, this story is a slow-burning, game-playing piece that, as always, Derek Jacobi performs so very well. Alexandra Riley does a great job as Calantha, a worthy opponent for the Master, forcing him to turn experimental in his world-conquering techniques. Focusing a lot on power and climbing the social hierarchy, it gives a good insight into this world's society. The War Master's vineyard also gets a little mention, which I believe is a nice callback to the first volume of adventures, a part of this series, in particular the Skyman. I absolutely love the idea of this version of the Master kind of dominating space, doing many evil things, and then at the end of his day, he simply goes to his vineyard and makes some nice wine to kind of chill out and relax as the universe burns around him. It's so very Derek Jacobi, and I love that theme that's kind of threaded throughout this series, and that build of context with this character that previously we knew very little about. One thing that the War Master does very, very well is kind of sitting by the sidelines, and we've seen this theme used in quite a lot of the previous box sets as well, in particular one of my personal favourite stories being The Skyman, and that episode basically sees the War Master giving somebody the tools to cause chaos and then basically enjoying watching it unfold, and this story is kind of like that. He sits by the sidelines and basically causes a political upstir. Something that is beautiful about the War Master, and something of which that I can't really say about other versions of the Master, is that he is a very gentlemanly, domestic version of the Master. I say that because a lot of the series that we've had so far have kind of seen him in rather domestic settings. We have him, for example, in this story, having a little bit of a meal in a restaurant with one of the main characters of the piece being Calantha, and basically they're just playing games with each other, and throughout the narrative we see them returning to this restaurant to basically score points against each other, and I think that's the way this Master works. He's cunning and devious, and that is very fun to listen to because you don't quite know what he's going to do next, and that is the beauty of having a series all about an antagonist. You are kind of rooting for the bad guy to win. It's basically the polar opposite to Doctor Who, and that's what makes it so interesting to listen to. Often box sets like to begin with an action-packed fast story to grab the listener's attention. I wouldn't exactly say that this episode really does that, but I do think that my appreciation of this episode builds massively with the context of the subsequent stories within this box set. There is simply no other way to describe A Quiet Night In other than one whole hour of mental abuse towards the lovable dear Jo Grant/Jones. This story focuses on the true evil nature of the War Master, and for me is a defining example of why he is my favourite Master of all time. Derek Jacobi provides one of his best performances to date, fitting into the shoes of Jo's uncle. However, Lou Morgan doesn't simply stop there. She also writes what is possibly one of Katie Manning's best performances to date as Jo Grant. Seeing the character being mentally twisted over time to think that the evil bugger she's sharing a grand house with on a miserable rainy night is indeed actually a beloved family member. as opposed to the evil maniac that is the Derek Jacobi master. The narrative twists and turns between scenes, adding to the confusion within Joe's mind. You yourself as a listener must deal with scene changes quite often, from warm living quarters to crowded parties and then back again to the quietness of this grand house. It creates an effective sense of disorientation that you as a listener experience, but also Joe Grant throughout this story. Of course, a lot of people do say when listening to Big Finish that they basically put characters together and then create a box set out of it, and to an extent in some series I can see their point. However, the beauty with The War Master is that so far we've had 6 volumes, and of course more volumes are on the way. However, what Big Finish have done and what James Goss and Scott Hancock have done is basically create an era in its own right. We have the War Master discovering new areas of the universe. We have, yes, a few run-ins with the Daleks, which can only be expected because this does of course take place within the Time War. However, for the most part, we are doing new things with the War Master. And when it comes to a series the likes of this, where we have him meeting up with companions, we have a reason behind it. We've got Joe Grant and we've got Nyssa of Traken. Both characters have a pre-existing relationship with the Master. They have been deeply affected by the War Master in the past. Of course, the Master basically terrorised the vast majority of the Third Doctor era when he was earthbound, and as a result, Joe had this rather unusual rapport with the Master. And then of course we have Nyssa, where basically the Master kills her very father. Personal connection there once again. So as a result, Lou Morgan excellently uses that throughout both of these stories, and it is very, very bleak, but very, very hard-hitting to listen to, but very, very effective. I really recommend that you listen to this one twice to really truly experience the Master's devious ways of digging into Joe's mind. This episode focuses a lot on Joe's personal memories, and as a result is quite heartbreaking. You see a very vulnerable side to the character, meanwhile the Master is absolutely loving every single second. Of course, naturally, Joe does eventually realise that he is indeed the Master and not her lovely uncle, and the revelation certainly lives up to expectation. The end is cruel, emotional, but I loved every minute. After deeply enjoying the infliction of pain within the previous episode, the War Master decides to unite with Nyssa, who's working on an antidote for the plague terrorising the Stagnant Protocol. The beauty of both Lou Morgan's scripts for this release is that we get to see older versions of both Joe and Nyssa, an accumulation of their past experiences, making for 2 very strong characters. Within the Orphaned, the Master takes the guise of a scientist who's come to help Nyssa find an antidote while she single-handedly mans a hospital ship filled with patients. Sarah Sutton offers a superb performance, and again, due to this story being a two-hander, really digs into the emotions of Nyssa. The Master emotionally manipulates Nyssa and makes her question the skills that she really has, blaming herself for situations that the Master has clearly constructed around her. As we move into the Nyssa episode, one of the things that I've wrote in my notes is that she's already having a mental breakdown and crying, and she doesn't even realise that her only company on a spaceship yet is indeed the Master, so the day is only going to get worse for her, because we have Nyssa dealing with all these people who've got the plague. They're at various different stages, and as a result, when she thinks everything is going well, they're about to make a scientific breakthrough, all of a sudden the vast majority of the patients start turning critical. It's a very stressful moment for Nyssa, and again, the story is designed to be stressful, to feel stressful for the listener, so you can really sense that sense of disaster from the character throughout this episode. She's helpless, and that's been really excellently written. For those of you that like stories with more variety and action, this series may not be for you. The narrative feels much deeper, getting into the minds of the characters. I recommend that you do not binge listen this release, as it is in fact quite hard hitting. Let each episode simmer. It's another very strong addition to this rather bold series. When listening to this box set, I decided to in fact allocate 1 day per episode, meaning that I listened to a story, then decided to listen to it again a little bit later on in the day, and then the following day move on to the next story. And that way I was able to appreciate each chapter within this series and the different events unfolding to the overall plot arc of the box set itself, which overall is kind of a considerably loose plot arc, in particular for the middle 2 episodes, but overall works very well. Killing Time concludes with Unfinished Business, also written by James Goss, returning to a very familiar landscape of episode 1. We have more interaction this time round between the War Master and Calantha. Without revealing too much, compared to episode 1, the War Master has a little more power within the Stagnant protocol. A simple way to describe this story is imagine the War Master in control of a vaccination program, and then imagine how disastrous that will be in reality. James Goss, without a doubt, understands this master inside out, how he works and also how he waits. The ending quarter of this episode superbly summarises some of this incarnation's best qualities, from the theatrical, absurd, evil laughter and the unbreakable intelligence that makes this mysterious gentleman, frankly, terrifying. For some characters, their outstanding moments are always delivered through grand speeches or action, but with Derek Jacobi, some of his most gripping moments can be seen when he's merely sat in a cell, waiting, knowing he's hatching a brilliantly evil plan. I do think that throughout this story, or maybe even episode 1, it may have been nice to see a little bit more development of the actual plague itself, witnessing the devastation and how it works and how it affects the people of the Stagnant protocol. However, when accompanied alongside the Lou Morgan contributions for this release, it may have been a little bit too bleak and heavy. Even though that I have said throughout this review that this story is quite slow-paced in parts, in particular the first and fourth story of the box set, where we have the main themes of Calantha and the Stagnant protocol, it's still a box set that I think is very well paced. All of the episodes by themselves, I think, work very, very well together, and perhaps for episodes 1 and 4, that may not be the case for those stories as single-handers. I think that the episodes really contribute to the box set overall, however, don't particularly work as standalone stories, but overall, and as always with the War Master series, regardless of who is writing it, there is that beautiful sense of consistency throughout. Even though 2 people have wrote this box set, the plot has been very cleverly devised, and overall it is really entertaining to listen to go through all of the parts and watch the story unfold in a rather detailed, well-paced manner. So there we have it, that is the War Master Killing Time featuring Derek Jacobi, another wonderful extension to this series, and I can't wait to see more Derek Jacobi as the War Master, of course, in 2022 and 2023. I'm so glad that this series has been extended because it has been very, very strong, although I must admit, the recent box sets have been going down a different route, especially with Hearts of Darkness and this box set. I found myself re-listening to the episodes within this series in order to fully understand the plot, to fully appreciate what is going on, because more than often there is a lot of fast-paced scenes and sometimes it can be quite hard to keep up with what's going on and kind of understand all the plot elements of the script. I certainly listened to the vast majority of this box set more than once in order to appreciate it, so I definitely recommend doing that if you're thinking about buying this series. It's a little bit more complex compared to some of the other new series stuff, but it most certainly pays off. I think that the War Master series continues to be in a league of its own when it comes to Big Finish content, and overall, again, another very, very strong box set indeed, and I can't wait to see what the War Master team do next. So thank you very much for watching this review. I really hope you have enjoyed it. Do of course stay tuned on The Host Productions for regular Doctor Who content. And on that note, have a nice day, and I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.